Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Money Talks. It has been truly an amazing journey. I don't even think we had thought beyond the fifth episode. And today we're sitting at episode 25, and I am super excited. This is somebody I've wanted to bring on the Money Talks for I think, at least the last 10 episodes, and we've just finally got his schedule and finally got him on board. He's well known across the ecosystem of an ace investor, an amazing founder, and he's been part of some amazing stories, both from the investor level and from the founder level. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Ramakant Sharma. Sir, thank you so much for being on this the Money Talks today and for gracing the 25th episode.
Thanks, Anurod. Thank you. I think it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for all the kind words, guys. I'm here to maybe tell a little bit whatever we walk through the story, and feel free to pitch in on any questions. Maybe Anurod will drive the discussion. Yeah.
No, definitely, sir. I think you were a graduate of IIT Kanpur, and then ISB. You did your MBA. IIT Kanpur just seems to produce some amazing entrepreneurs. You keep meeting them in the ecosystem. What is it about IIT Kanpur that makes such amazing entrepreneurs?
So I think, Anurod, my sense on any educational system, I think India is a little bit by definition is competitive uh, environment. So what IIT little bit assures in general, not only Kanpur, is some basics check, like you have been a little bit hardworking, maybe you know how to write an exam well. JEE is not an easy exam. So certain assurance on discipline, hard work is little bit given, which I think you need not to really check much because that's a little bit assured. But moreover, I think the education is little bit more holistic. As I keep saying, entrepreneurship is not really knowing one skill at a time. If somebody says I am a good developer or I am a good finance guy, I think it's a mix of everything. You need to be good at many things. Unfortunately, it's a multidisciplinary kind of a situation. So I think IITs in general or the great institutions world over produce so much emphasis on multidisciplinary things, which means you have to be knowing even the life skills, because you have to it's a journey where you need to traverse massive ups downs, and it's a sometimes mix of everything you face. So I think the as a purely from an education perspective, this is a very holistic education, and I think fortunate enough to be part of that education in early stage of my academic life. So I think that's what I would say, and honestly a little bit inspirational in the sense that you see multiple cases where your seniors have built large companies around the
Mm-hmm.
globe. So that also, I think, apart from the skills and multidisciplinary I touched upon, it's a more like it's a confidence and trust in yourself kind of a story. Sometimes, uh, by and large, the country is definitely comes through a little bit less risky mindset, which actually, a, a very important thing for an entrepreneur to cross once in life, that the biggest risk is actually not doing a startup is a risk, or really not being an
So true. Mm.
entrepreneur is a risk. So I think that stage of mind needs some degree of self confidence, which I think is demonstrated by so many examples around. So I think mix of these two. You see people similar to you, they look like you, they had a family background like you, studied in the same courses, same hostel, has built so many uh, great enterprises around, great things socially, profit making companies, social companies, or maybe in general public service, but lots of excellence around. So I think that's the mix of these two things, which I think I'll say helped me a lot. And honestly, I think post that it's a journey. Everyone has its own journey. Even the IITs really do not underwrite that you can be successful, but I think certain basics are given. Yeah.
So true. I think the discipline required. I have my first cousin who went to IT Bombay. The discipline required to get through that exam, and it really puts you. And then obviously getting through 4 years of IIT by itself, as you correctly put it, it just prepares you with a whole rounded kind of education. to be prepared for to be prepared for the for the world actually. But what I really liked what you said was that it is, if you don't do a startup, that's the real risk you're not taking early in life.
Absolutely. I think, and to reach to that conclusion, maybe some of these pointers help you, because see, sometimes you don't know how much is the risk we are taking. I think now the bird has started embracing failures. Secondly, the point is, failures are not failures; those are learnings. So if we go a little bit in the history, which I personally observed, I think the all of these learnings have translated into a good value creation at one place. Not if you are startup one, maybe startup two, or somebody else, but these are definitely good learnings which eventually made individuals to create much larger value than in the conventional path.
Yeah, I know, definitely. And I think that early on in your career you probably are a little more flexible in doing things than later on, when you've got maybe a wife and kids and responsibilities in life. Then it probably costs a lot more to get started up than early on in life.
I agree. I think the little bit risk profile also changed with the, as you rightly said, risk profile is completely a function of what stage of your life. But in general, I think the
Hmm.
bird assessment of risk itself is changing with time.
Hmm.
I think now the kind of risk, like I'll take a precise example. The risk of losing job was much higher. Now I think people who are in the job also do not care for job, purely from a perspective of losing it. I think they
Right.
can get better jobs or the same job again, and the same company hires again. So it has become more, or I think more and more, you know, learnings, and people are finding environments which give them faster learnings than
Hmm.
anything else. So I think the young enterprises, the young companies, the organizations where lots of, even the large companies sometimes have such a nimble processes, that you have given them a chance to learn. And and learning cycle is shortened with time. Your knowledge, your own self studies, your exposure, and a little bit, being more holistic in many aspects now available in a click away. So I think the attempt is to shorten your learnings and really use those learnings in a very meaningful way, which creates value, wealth, prosperity, and a progress. So I think it's a little bit that thought. So my sense is the traditional point of view of risk is also slowly fading away.
Hmm.
Even if you are,
True.
whatever career stage you are, what you are leaving and what you're going to, and what you cannot go back to where you were, was a very 20-year-old concept. You can
Hmm.
actually switch things pretty fast nowadays. Mostly people are able to change industries, do things which they really wanted to do. So my sense on risk is also very different now. In fact, it's a I generally keep saying the life in general has become a healthy balance. Even if you start your own company, that is also a risk. You are in a job, that
Hmm.
is also a risk. So a kind of a mindset you live with. Risk is a mindset.
Correct.
We have
Correct. Yeah, that's
investors
true.
starting from a listed equity to somebody who is buying a hope and idea.
Hmm.
So I think it's a risk appetite, which is again a mindset. If you start putting too much of a mathematical framework on a risk, the various models in the world for risk. But my belief on this is, after all of this, it's the element of luck and an opportunity and chance and an attempt, an honest attempt to really create something or to solve problems. Risk aspect is slightly taken care of,
No,
and
wow,
more
that's an
in the
amazing thought.
newer world.
It's an amazing thought. I think, especially for all the founders who are listening in, right? This whole relationship with risk, like you correctly said, it's a mental thing, right? You know, everything has a risk. Even being employed in a company for long also has its own risk. I mean, ask people that were employed at Enron or that were employed at Sahara, right? I mean, all of these companies eventually big enough. They people thought they were too big to fail, but they did, right? And
Absolutely. And sometimes in those cases, you're not equipped enough to face the world also if you're not
hmm,
learning fast, because the ecosystem around you is changing pretty fast. So I think, but having said that, the large organization also provide you a chance to learn massively. So it's a both way. I think you have to live that mindset, be very, very, more. I keep saying, keep your eyes and ears open. What is
Hmm.
changing around you while you're sleeping also. So
Very
if you
true.
are really a cognizant human being in 2020, I think the immense opportunities are there. At the same time, you have a risk of losing out everything if you sleep longer. So I think this is a situation where we need to be 100% on our toes, really updated, and keep learning new things, embracing change to the point that change is the only reality and constant, and live with
Yeah,
that.
it's only constant. Yeah. In fact, I was just telling somebody today who had come to the office that the cost, the risk, as you were talking, the cost of getting to revenues or to getting a startup to traction has probably come down to 1% of what it was 20 years ago. Because today you don't need to have a proper office, no warehouse, no, no, you don't even have to have full time employees, right? You can do everything without actually owning anything. And
200% with you. I think I'll just add one more thing on this. The definition of asset class is also changing. If we go to the fundamental economics, there was a point when land, labor, and capital was defining the overall economic and social activities for human beings, which means if you have land and you control the labor and the capital which can buy machines, pretty much defines your success.
yeah,
But the time I think the businesses where land has become irrelevant, like companies who have created a massive wealth. In fact, the 70-80% of the last 30-40 years wealth has been created by the companies who doesn't use land, like Google's, Facebook's. So land in
true.
itself is becoming irrelevant now. The second was actually the labor. So the definition of labor has also changed. You can't control labor. Labor is now free commodity, and the capital markets have figured out their flows towards the best efficiency for the capital. So I think with time, what has changed is it's a from land labor capital economy to a economy of being a uh, smart. It's the economy of being a somebody who is passionate, disruptive, and can solve problems. So, and the capital and labor are land are available, or they are irrelevant, because I think the capital will chase you. The land is definitely limited, but my sense is a good chunk of good businesses do not need land
True.
in 2020. So I think the resources which are needed for a business will, I think, go more on a auto driven fashion than you need to attract those. The capital will attract the business.
Very true.
And
Very, I mean, yeah. It also becomes your moat, like how quickly you grow. I think that
absolutely,
IP, there was an entire thing of, IP, do you have IP and have you filed for IP? Now it's like, how fast can you grow? And that is your moat.
absolutely. I'll give you an example of some of the D2C companies, new startups. So I keep telling the brands, how do you create brand? So first thing was you need to manufacture. Do you really have any see a dependency on manufacturing? Manufacturing has become now an API. It's a contract manufacturing. You have that available as a more or less commodity. That was a distribution. Distribution, internet came faster than actually in many places electricity, which essentially means we really, and one of the largest moat or the biggest moat we hear from FMCG companies and the brands that we have the massive distribution. The relevance of distribution is going down. Now everybody has a distribution. Distribution is a
Yeah,
click away. So I think the first two, manufacturing and distribution, are no longer as important as they were before. The third
hmm,
part is, which is actually the marketing, the share of voice, the branding, the positioning of the product, which I guess the smarter economy and the new modern economy is able to do equally good as a large conglomerate FMCG company. In fact, sometimes in a more faster and nimble way. So I think the modes which your incumbents had are becoming irrelevant rather than you have any new mode.
true, true, true.
Everybody has got an opportunity and chance to play a fair game, and in that I think the perception on consumers and all around ecosystem is also changing. Earlier, people might think that working for a company is a sense of pride, or maybe it increases their social value or something. Today, people really do not care where they work. What they care is what they work on, what problem they
Right.
solve,
Wow.
what value add they have added today. If I'm sitting on a big chair on a company where I had 3 4 random calls, and the my value add for the day was actually zero or sometimes negative, I might not be, you know, learning as fast, or nor might not be enjoying, which I could have enjoyed in a place where actually I added some value to the system. For instance, I'll code my this thing every day. I come to office. When I go back, I write a few lines. Could what value I add to the company today, and
Hmm.
what would have happened if I would have not come to office today? What difference I made by coming to office today, except creating an overhead on some people in the office? I might be a negative value to my office if I, and I genuinely feel that this is, I think, one or two problems which where I added an incremental value today and this day went well. Everything
Hmm.
else, otherwise, it's the same company. It's running without me, and honestly, it can. So the point is, every in modern professional world, I keep checking this point, like why you do come, I ask random questions. Why do you come to this office every day morning? And there is a very few people who are bothered on salary in Bangalore kind of a ecosystem. For taken our engineers, every Saturday they might get 5 offers,
Hmm.
but they come to this office. And why? Because I think there is something different. It's not about, there is a sense of pride on the work they do. They really feel, uh, you know, a, a very proud moment when we solve a problem, see the outcome, a degree of freedom you get of doing the work. And work is an integral part of human living. If you ask people that you'll be paid enough money without any work, I'll put it that way also. कि ठीक है, you might get your salary even if you don't come to office. I think that will not be the happier state. So the way we have progressed as human beings, I think it's a very different. The fundamental needs have changed. Actually, they're fulfilled very easily. The most fundamental things are becoming irrelevant with time in the modern economy. The prosperity is definitely increasing, whatever the data and science, but we are not, and the people we meet across in the ecosystem are not struggling for food and clothes. I think what is making them really, really uh, passionate and driven is the change they bring every day.
It's
So
about
I
the
think
challenge. It's
it's
really about
about
the
the
challenge.
challenge. It's about like what I am contributing to, what I'm living for. So I think that ecosystem with the speed of change, and if I can say so, I think in next 5 to 10 years, this kind of a behavior will be on an exponential curve. It is not going to decrease, because now if we talk to youngsters, they do not understand politics at all, like very few. They do not care for much of a social principles. What they really care for is what they enjoy doing today. And are they healthy? Are they really contributing? Are their work is being respected? Or even this work is relevant or
Hmm.
irrelevant to the world? Nobody has hesitation on switching the work. If I'm doing something which no longer makes any sense to anybody on this globe, I think it's better I start playing a cricket or do something very different. So, so I think it's a very fundamental thought, and this thought is coming because I think we have got a one degree of lesser risk and a slightly higher prosperity, especially in the zone we operate in,
Hmm.
around us. So I think that's the point I leave this thing, that you'll see a fundamental shift much more than the current levels in coming years.
So, like I promised, we took a tangent right in the first 5 minutes. But I'd like, and there is a thought that I have for later on when we talk about live space. Before I get there, I want to just jump to, you started at Mintra, and in around 2010, 11, right? By that time, Mintra was already a high flying startup. Uh, so what does it take? What does it take to get or like earn a role in a
Yeah.
startup that is doing so well? And you went on to become CTO and at a very senior position. What does it take, like, to first of all get a job at like a place like Mintra, you know, and
Yeah.
and and then to obviously then go up the ranks and get to the position where you were at, and with Mukesh and all of them.
Totally. So I think, uh, yeah. So I joined Mintra in 2008, actually, not 10.
Acha.
So basically, uh, that time Mintra was a pretty small startup. I think it has not raised Series A. It's a
Acha.
pre-Series A company, and we were selling more, custom t-shirts and custom mugs,
Hmm.
more into B2B business, little bit into B2C business. But having said that, the call to join, I think, for the youngsters and everyone, and for me as well, were twofold. One is, you always, as I said, keep your eyes and ear open. I think the 2008 and 7 was a time when Mukesh had a very strong thesis that India will see an upsurge in e-commerce. And 2008, I think very few e-commerce companies existed.
Hmm.
Very few. It's we are talking
Very
about 10 years back, but there was a vision that internet is already there. Once internet is there, the transactions on internet are inevitable. They are going to happen. And sometime around the same time, Flipkart came in. We could see uh, all around that e-commerce is something where I think the 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 traction and next the many things, but one of the things in Indian internet is going to be e-commerce. Consumers
Hmm.
will definitely give some value to either the choice. E-commerce gives larger choice. No showroom can have as big catalog as an e-commerce can. So maybe it is choice, maybe it is price point, or maybe it is convenience. One of these three will lead a consumer to transact, but it is not imaginary. It's a real. E-commerce is going to happen. And I think the second part is getting to job and how. So I think this particular case, my core skill was mostly into the technology space. So e-commerce companies need CTOs and the
Hmm.
technology skills much more than many other companies in general, but every skill is needed. It's not that the tech guys, the marketing guys, maybe the retail people. So e-commerce is a very multidisciplinary by definition, but at this point of time, sort of a the founders were my college senior from IIT Kanpur. They were in a need of somebody who can lead the Mukesh is a couple of years senior to me from IIT Kanpur, and
Acha.
uh, they are in a need of revamping the technology leadership. And I had an experience on technology side, and my belief on internet was, and especially the commerce was pretty high. Then a little bit, I don't know how, but I had a decent sense on unit economics, what category makes a slightly much more sense. So I was a believer of a slightly better economic side of a fashion as a
Hmm.
category compared to electronics and books as a category. So these are the maybe a decision points, but very macro points. More important, it's I think the founders to whom you are going to work in such a early startup, and that makes all the difference because I'm telling you the it's all about the captain of the ship who from whom you
Hmm.
can learn, inculcate the vision, and really go to a point that I think there is a fashion commerce going to happen, but before me there is somebody who is believing it more strongly. So I think there is a founder who's passionate about it, you can learn from, and a little bit judgment on the market, that e-commerce, and there is no fashion commerce company where US and China had plenty of examples where fashion did well, and India, such a large country, had zero fashion commerce company. So I
Yep.
think it was a more of a straightforward choice to me. It's not this thing that uh, and the call can be the skip the e-commerce thing, and I somehow felt that skipping a e-commerce is not a right thing to do. In fact, my belief on e-commerce is increased over time. 2008 now to 20. Every year, I think I feel much more stronger than a year before, because it's a changing all around, and more transacting users are getting added. Now we have started talking about another 400 million users who will transact someday. So this story has been completely a upward story. I haven't seen even a one quarter down in my career of 12 years of e-commerce, both Livspace and Mintra, where our number of orders gone down.
Wow.
Never, because this country, you are with the tailwinds,
Hmm.
and we are an industry where I think the transactions has to be up. So I haven't seen a and gone to a discussion yet where somebody is discussing my sales had decreased. I'm not talking about the 2 months of COVID where I think many companies has to go through a lockdown and shut down. Those are like a boundary conditions, but generically, and and the way we bounce back, and not only us, I think at Livspace, in every other businesses, I keep hearing the transactions are back to
Yeah,
pre-COVID levels,
and much more, I think, much
much more.
stronger.
Absolutely. So my sense on, I think, to answer a question, once you spot opportunity which is into, see, it needs three things. One is a passionate founder, and an opportunity which is tailwind. Sometimes I've seen startups done too early, before their time. Then e-commerce maybe in 90s might have not survived.
True.
And that's, I can little bit with the advantage of hindsight. But I think if you're in an industry of tailwinds, that tailwinds take you a two step forward if you move one step forward. So it's a tailwind and a founding team, definitely. And I think the third is aligned investors. There is somebody who, because you are creating value out of nothing, so there is somebody on the capital markets or a financial investor who is equally believing the same story, and it's a belief
Hmm.
and hope. There's no numbers, but there's a one person who has to believe that fashion commerce or a assisted sale of furniture and interior design will work. And that is something, I think, the combination of these three will definitely, I think, if you found any time in your career these three things together, one or two great investors are backing, you like the founders, and you see a tailwind on the industry, it's a straight answer: join the rocket ship, because it's not going to stay. I've seen rocket ships getting derailed if any of these three is not right. It's a
Okay.
tailwind industry, founder is passionate, but unfortunately, uh, financial market is not willing to buy the story.
Hmm.
That is not going to happen, because you are going against the so many things.
So the three legs are tailwind. That there should be a tailwind. The founder should be passionate, and you should have the right investors backing you.
Absolutely. So if you come across a startup which is, let us say, series A or pre-series A, one or two great investors are there on the table, uh, you really believe that founders are passionate, they have vision, I think it's a easy call.
Hmm. No, that's very interesting. Actually, like you rightly said, the founder is so important. Like he really attracts the talent. I think it's because he sets the culture and therefore then attracts the talent, right? That comes to
Yeah,
that culture. But coming back to your Mintra days, early on 2008 and today 2020, today you're running. Mintra was in comparison to Livspace probably a lot simpler problem to solve, right?
yeah,
Livspace does so many different things. So but the engineering challenge of 2008 would have been different because you are now dealing with sub 1 Mbps internet speed, mostly still to come to maybe broadband, right? I mean, broadband was not ubiquitous, and mobile was definitely not there, right?
yeah.
Mobile internet was far away. So, sir, when you compare, like, do you think the challenges then were more, or do you think the challenges today are more? I mean, today you've got super duper cheap one GB. Everybody's got 4G internet, 5G is coming, right? I mean, in that terms, what do you say? Which one do you find to be more
Yeah, no,
challenging?
great question. I think, see, the both the stages have challenges, but I'd classify them into different kind of challenges. So 2006, 7, 8, 9, I think we were trying to define the industry, which means, more like finding someone who is at least have a one degree of willingness to work
Hmm.
in startups. A what is a startup was not so definitive, so clear. Why I'll leave my existing job, how my parents will think, friends will think. So we're struggling with the how the consumers will trust us. So the challenges were very different. Those very fundamental. Like I'll tell you challenges. Sometimes the shipping cost of a certain products like backpack was much higher. Shipping from Bangalore to Mumbai will cost maybe more than the bag itself.
Oh wow.
So we're not really aligned as infra. There are many things like delivery boy delivered a goods, and there's no callback mechanism where we know that product is delivered. What we thought, if anything left our warehouse, is delivered,
Acha.
because we had no mechanism to know whether it has reached to the consumer. There's no
True.
APIs on the logistics side system. So I think the challenges at that point of time were very different. And the biggest source of information sometimes was call center, analytics driven on the website. With time, I think the infra on logistics, the analytics, the feedback loops evolved very massively. But what has happened is, and that is the right sequence. So in the early days, as you rightly said, Livspace is a very complex category compared to a book selling or a t-shirt selling business, and that is a natural progression in any country. When the problems are much larger on the infra, I think the people will start selling books first, or the
Acha.
t-shirt and shoes first. Once
Is
those are
it?
sold,
Hmm.
absolutely, then you maybe pick up a complicated categories like, you know, uh, uh, selling jewelry on internet that needs insurance on not only the feedback loops, it needs insurance on the delivery, it
Hmm.
needs many other things. If you are selling something which is expiry, temperature controlled, then you need a different
Furniture.
kind of warehouse, maybe a pharma or a cosmetics company. And
Hmm.
then I think the the last step is selling solutions. So the journey starts always with the product selling business, where you sell a product. Livspace is into the solution selling business. And I'll say parallel to Urban Clap is still a solution selling business in my mind. So I think the solutions selling businesses are education online, like an
Hmm.
academy shipping you a bottle of shampoo at home. They are actually educating you. So these
Hmm.
are actually very abstract and solution selling businesses. So in any evolution of e-commerce, I think the first is the products. Within the products, the easy products first, then the heavy products which called white goods. Like selling
Yeah.
AC is difficult. You need to sell AC, then install it. And,
True.
and white goods and heavy goods business is a different category in many sense, including furniture. And then you become a services selling, the solution selling business. Someday we might not be surprised if somebody is selling a lawyer service on internet, which
True.
is I think very different from selling a pair of shoes. So I think it has evolved in 12 years. Now all the modern startups I see around are selling solutions. Like, and I read a article somewhere. I think it's a read by one of the tier one VCs. It's written by one of the tier one VCs. The services led solution centric companies are going to be monopolistic soon. This is like a, a very complex solution put in on the steroid, and the modes are much higher. So I think if somebody has to do e-commerce in 2020, we do not have a choice of selling t-shirts and books at the first place, or a mobile phone.
True. True.
The only choice we have is a product innovation, which is I think it's a coming big way nowadays. You see so many D2C brands, they're saying the existing products are not good and let me introduce a new products in the market. And the third is I think the second is, so that's the first, and the second is really bringing those services out, like home services one of them, interior services. Then I'm an angel investor in a company which does a car repairing service.
Hmm.
This services in general, and no, I'm not talking about India. Whatever knowledge I have over the world and countries, have a larger degree of information asymmetry, a very high degree of lack of trust. Products have trust because if you take a picture, you can do a certification of certain kind, FDA approved, FSI approved. You can write a weight, you can write a composition, and you can still put a framework around it. Putting a framework of services is something which I think internet will be able to do much better than anybody could do in past. So this is, I think, the people are uh, subscribing actually, not buying a sudden health activities on internet. So this
True.
is something which is, I think, going to be a third gen of internet, and we'll see. I think the future of internet commerce, especially, is going to be around that. And once that transaction happens, we have seen the the adjacent businesses, which are payments, logistics, video calling, CRMs. So I think the you see the first version of CRM. There's no CRM which was meant to sell interior design on internet. We need to develop our own CRM. It's the same situation where I think in 2007, 8 we were learning how to make the logistics cost efficient for e-commerce. So I think the adjacent industries will start catching up naturally. There is a, a very different kind of a wallet structure needed in services, kind of a setup, starting from escrow accounts to consumer to the service provider to the platform. And there is a multiple handshakes. This work is done, this is not done, and auto settling of that payment scenario. Those kind of wallets, I think, the first time we have to create for ourselves. If I use a standard wallet in the market, the wallet has a one-way transaction. It will transfer money from a person A to B, but that doesn't work. Here, there's a person C which has to endorse the transaction first. So I think that this work has been done to my quality. Hence, the money can go from wallet A to B. Those kind of a payment infra, that I think that itself can be a company. Then
Wow.
services market, we introduced something called uh, services. By and large, had people who are not on payroll. Like you will rarely find electrician on payroll, plumber on a payroll. By and large, industry, even the people who work on factories, manufacturing, it's a semi payroll kind of a structure. So putting those into a structure payroll through activity stream of activity of work, and really sound it like a everyone has a predictive payroll is nothing but 100% surety of a certain money in a first week of a month.
Hmm.
That literally is a definition of payroll.
Correct.
But the same promise you can actually make to somebody who is not legally this thing, but financially the same thing, if you can control the activity of the work in a certain designed fashion. So those are the challenges which services e-commerce has to solve its own. And more I read in the developing nations, TechCrunch articles, new fundings, I uh, I have seen one or $2 billion company which exactly tried to create a Shopify for services. We have seen a Shopify for product sale. So
Correct.
I so there is a evolution on problem statement with time, and my sense is, I think we were sort of early on in the industry. We had to work on defining a lot, but 2020 we'll see many more startups coming in services commerce. So I think, as I said, we'll slightly digressed, but it's a
No,
kind
but
of
I
an
really like the thought that today the world has changed from product selling to solution selling. Like
yeah.
today, we had we are doing a secret Santa at work, and I was looking for something to buy for someone under 1,000 rupees because that's the limit. And I went and bought a T-shirt. I literally did, but I bought that T-shirt because that was a quirky T-shirt. Was solving. It was really a solution and not the product that got
Yeah.
me to buy that T-shirt because it was quirky. It was different. It was from a different website, and it's so interesting. Like that was probably, I mean, a profound insight for today. Like
And
self.
absolutely, and I'll give you some more examples. I think I'm not generically defining it, but I'll tell you, if you ask somebody, like few people ask me, what we can gift you? I said I have everything. And actually you have more. You have more clothes, more shoes, more books. I think you have many things which are more than the need. In some cases, people have more homes, more furniture,
Yeah, right.
but there is a certain unsolved problems. They're still, I think, looking for something. and what they're looking for is a very precise solutions. So I think once you come out of the product selling zone, you become a solution selling zone. I think people are really looking for solutions of the real problems they incur on their day-to-day life.
Sir, I'm going to skip a little bit of what we had
Yeah.
decided to talk about. We'll go straight to Livspace. I want to understand, like, what was the, so you went from Mintra and you obviously went from, you know, uh, what you were doing in terms of selling fashion, and then you jumped and joined and started a company called Livspace. What was the inspiration for starting a company like Livspace?
I think, under honestly, the true story is this came from mine and a little bit both mine and Anu's personal experience. So there was a time, somewhere that time, actually, I uh, naturally ended up buying a home for my own living purpose, and there was a, you know, there was a obsession on consumer experience, technology, many things, and this was the time when I realized that there's a problem here. Something, if you buy a home, you go through not so great journey in general to get it ready for living, and that kind of a situation led to probably one of the highest monetary value transaction for me, which we
True.
have gone through a very less trustworthy folks around, relied on so many money on the people, so much money on the people which we can't even call off. They can change their mobile number tomorrow morning. And and someone like me who came completely from a software engineering, had no clue. I knew nobody in the Bangalore. I'm not from Bangalore. There was a
Mhm.
point when I was asking questions. If this guy doesn't come tomorrow, he's taken me so many lakhs today. They said he'll come, but that is a hope. There is no process. There is not a call center, no website. And then I started checking curiously with all of my friends. "Ki, have you ever bought home? And have you done some interior done, kitchen, wardrobe? How do you get it done?" Everybody answered me that it works like this only.
Acha.
And there is no a place where we can go and buy it. You have to ask somebody in your neighbor or watchman who will tell you who can do in your building. And that's the only way, which I already did because there was a watchman and a poster there. So I thought, why is somebody is not solving this? And is it a birth solving problem? And I think the second question first, I think I was chatting with Anuj and he said, this problem is pain and it is not solved even in US. He was living in US at that point in time. And let's do a little bit research. So we started talking to many folks, people around. We found it is not solved. It is a problem which is very unsolved on price points, transparency, quality, time. Everything was actually compromised all around. And then, as I said, the second question first: what's the economic value of solving this problem? Is it a worth solving problem or it's just a personal gain? We realize it's a huge problem. I think probably it's the second, third largest purchase people do all across the world in their life, and the economic value is north of $20 billion in select cities in India. It's a
Wow.
large problem.
Per city.
It's a combined the country. I'm talking the time of India alone, and the solution is unsolved in the world. So you can go international also, which later on we launched in Southeast Asia and now going to other countries. So I think typically a 1 crore homeowner would spend 10 to 15 lakhs in interiors, which is huge. Which is 15% of the total new home sold interiors, the home
Wow.
real estate. That's a large problem, large ticket size, and honestly a, a very broken profit pools available everywhere, like a hardware shop to a designer to contractors. So I think this creates a case of aggregation, creating a corporate and a structure around this. Somewhere around that, I think we started and launched in Bangalore with a friends and family kind of a situation, and tried doing some homes here and there. Within that, I think then it's a story, it's a journey basically where I think the interest of the investors, then lots of competition, and people realize that there's one more insight in the story which we sort of learned during the journey. We as an Indian are very event driven. which means if somebody is getting married, marriage is an event, or there
Yeah.
is a birth of a kid kind of event, or a Diwali is an event, or let us say you buy a new home and get a position, that's event. You relocate from a city to another city. So these events trigger most of the interiors and furniture purchase. We do not buy furniture just for replacement like we buy fashion products.
True. True.
So so I think what the approach we took was slightly event driven sell, which is people are looking for a kid's room to be done. They are not looking for a study table for a kid. When
Hmm.
there is a kid is born, if there's a marriage, somebody is looking for a paint and curtain change, there is some solution. So this needs a solution which solves a need of an event. And then we realize the second insight is this solution is pretty much assisted. We as a, and not only Indian, I'll say world over, people look for some third person who can help us getting the bathroom or a kitchen or a living room done.
True.
It's not that I have a, some color sense, I can arrange things, but it is not. And the reason being, maybe the cost of going wrong is much higher than buying t-shirt. If you end up buying a misfit t-shirt or a wrong color t-shirt, you don't care. But if you get the kitchen done wrongly, probably it's a difficult to change.
Yeah.
So,
True.
so I think they'll still rely on an expert. So it's a assisted solution centric sale is going to be the solution. And it's a large unsolved problem where again I said the fundamental principle of going to a solution and a services sale on internet was very existent in both of our minds. Only thing is which service to pick. And this was the service which naturally came to us with a very big TAM and a serious real problem in hand. So I think we are in a very a large unorganized real problem in hand, which I think was the story. And honestly, the first principle thought helped us in many aspects. Not coming from interior background is sometimes I'd say it's good also, because most of the time you get a chance to relearn and rethink and redefine, which I think you could have come with a certain degree of biasness if you have those kind of a knowledge. So we still say in a meeting, assume God gives us a chance to produce a best living room again, what would be the method? We are still willing to learn. Or what should be the ideal way of producing a kitchen? We don't know the past. But if you know that I know for a sure how the kitchen is being done, I think you'll end up replicating some suboptimal solution. So we are still a believer of not knowing is a good thing.
And so, I mean, and obviously, I mean, the investors just lapped it up, right? They loved what you were doing at Livspace. I mean, 196 million, I think you've raised as per traction from a marquee set of investors. I mean, investors that I think any, if you ask any founder to list down the top 10 investors that they want, Goldman Sachs, Bessemer, TPG, Helion, Jungle, Pidilite, Peugeot's Group Holding Company, FFP, and so on. I mean, some amazing group of investors. You know, when did you know that Livspace was going to be this big?
Honestly, I think, see, you have a sort of a, I think to answer this question, I think at the beginning, having a this kind of a sort of a that this is the exit investors will raise this much is difficult. But what can be assessed is the how complex problem we are really entering into,
Hmm.
which means, you know, what is the assessment of the problem? It's a $20 billion problem or a 1 billion TAM problem. The complexity of the problem. By looking at the problem, sometimes you have a sense like this solution of this problem will need 3 years and 20 mil. There's a problem which will need 10 years and 200 mil. There's a
Hmm.
problem which might need 20 years and $1 billion to raise. If the
Hmm.
problem statement, so I think the macro view on a problem and solution and estimate on resources must to have, which I think we had a very reasonable sense that this is not an easy problem to solve. But at the same time, I think predicting precisely that this is going to be the investor sequence, this is what you know, uh, 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 the exact amount, this is going to be this big. That's very difficult. This is journey. I think You need to learn on the fly, optimize it, or maybe live with that. I think my answer would be, you need to be really on top of the your business. And business, if changes, you need to change accordingly, whether it's a resource requirement or maybe any other change.
I mean, it's like I said. I think founders are obviously chiming in saying just how valuable today's conversation really has been. Uh, but in terms of your key, sir, I mean, I was just calculating the other day, and I was saying, you've raised 8 rounds in 6 years. I think many founders will struggle to raise 2 rounds in 6 years, but you've been prolific at it. Is there a key? Is there a secret sauce to your success?
I still believe, honestly, somewhere I think there's a investors which will really back the passionate story. We have been be very passionate. We live the dream we had, and honestly, even if we go wrong, we try to correct it with the same passion again and again. We have a reason to, I think, wake up every day morning. So that invest that passion, I think sometimes invest not sometimes. My belief is the investors will able to buy in that, because in the end, I think they wants to bet something which is large value creation and something which is honestly in the right hands. So I think investors have a very clear view on a business and a founders most of the time, two criteria. And third, which is I think the horizontal. Sometimes it's not about anything else. I think the capital markets have learned the money flow its own.
Hmm.
I think they are, that's their job. I think to find out the places where capital has to be deployed and do a justice with a kind of a responsibility they own towards the capital. So I think it's a mix of all three. If you are doing something, and let's say a dollar is a dollar, by putting that dollar, maybe it's your own dollar, to a place A versus B, if A has a more value creation of the same dollar, the chances of A getting higher dollar is much higher. But there is a limit, because someday the A will say no to the much more dollars. Then the capital will move to a second best option around and the third best, and it's again supply of capital and demand. So it will reach to a natural steady state. So my sense is, I think the founder should not be reading too much on fundraise and this thing. If you're doing right things, the you'll get value of what you built in either form. Either the investors in various rounds will give you, or something the public market will give you, or the M&A will give you. But value is not going to away if you have really created it.
And sir, so as we have to do to everybody, we're going to do a quick thing called the rapid fire questions. It's quick 10 questions. We'll ask for short answers. You can, and if there's something that comes out, don't worry. We have time for you to go deeper into it. But it'll be very quick,
Yeah.
10 questions. I'll start right away. If there's any questions that anybody has, you can please put them in the comments. We'll try to take them at the end, but we're pretty much out of time at this point. So first question for you is the Peter Thiel question. It is one thing that you know to be true, but very few people believe with you on it.
I think almost everything. Basically, there has been a time when I think starting shoes to and selling interiors on internet and many things. I think, see, India has seen this much more than many other countries. So answer is, I think, many things.
Is there one piece of advice you would give to founders about fundraising?
My sense is, don't make that as a goal. Make that as a side activity. It will happen if you are doing right things in a right place. It's a not a mainstream activity. It is definitely a side activity.
Fundraising is a side activity of what the real business is, and people are investing in that.
Absolutely.
Sir, if you could pick the brain of one person for 24 hours, ask them anything you want, who would it be?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. It's been the most popular answer in 25 odd episodes. And what would you like to learn from him?
I think somewhere there is a curiosity in my mind about him. So I think he's somebody who has always been a little bit intrigued and something. which I keep wondering on various aspects of his decisions, things he's done. I think those are definitely class apart in my mind, and I want to go through that process at least once on a first hand, given an opportunity.
One thing you would like to change about the Indian startup ecosystem?
I think somewhere we do not understand the solutions or the product so well before we understand the MIS. So I have seen many cases where people are really funding SaaS companies on ARR
Hmm.
without knowing what they solve. Or there are companies which are valued on the sales value, but I think somewhere we assume that if there is a sales value, it must be solving a problem, which is very true in a correlative way. But I've seen in a and the question was more ecosystem. So both founders, investors in general, as an ecosystem, I think we should be more focused on what we are trying to change and solve.
Hmm.
The numbers will definitely come in because we are a large country. If you really solve a problem, I think there will be buyers.
My father used to say, if you can solve the problem for 1% of Indians, you'll be one of the biggest companies in the world.
Absolutely, and that 1%, 1% is doable because see, if your product is loved by 10 people, those are unrelated to you. They are not biased by anybody to buy your product. They were not influenced by anybody to buy your product. That means you need to find people similar to those 10 guys,
Yep.
which is, I think, doable. And the moment 1% is huge. If you get a 1%, then it's already a big company. Even
Yeah,
if a
yeah.
half a percent will make a big company. So
Yep.
I think we should not be worrying on numbers too much. First thing we should be worrying all the time is it a worth solving problem or am I solving something?
Hmm.
What is missing and what gap I'm going to bridge?
No, very, very interesting. So, what's the first thing that you do after waking up?
I think checking my phone and replying to all the WhatsApp messages and I think all other messages. And maybe if there's a missed call, then replying to that call.
And usually, are you a morning person or a night person? Best time to
No,
reach you.
I wake up late, so I think you can say a night person and late in the morning.
So, good guys, best time to email him is at late at night or right before he wakes up. So, usually late morning. And sir, I have just two last questions. One is what company, and this is the only investor question I had, which is what company in your anti portfolio hurts you the most?
I think I should have invested in Postman.
Oh wow,
Basically, I think uh, I've been an early user of the solution they provide, and somewhere didn't know it's an Indian company for a long period of time. Later on, realized it's a Bangalore Kormangala company, and then I think now all of us know. But I think no other company I felt that way. If it is the one answer is that.
wow, Postman, it's amazing. And so last question for tonight: three books you would recommend to founders that they should read.
I think see there's again a perspective, but I think founders should read some of the common books, and they're common because they're most read. I think the first principle thought, which is a life changing thought, gives on a social side is a sapiens, and hard things about hard things gives you more of a management point of view and how things change to scale. Maybe the third book I'll add is 0 to 1, which is very basic, but it's a good read if you haven't read it. I think these three I'd recommend definitely must to read kind of a books.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll put those books in the comment section. I think there could not have been a better end. As you know, this is the last episode for 2020, and it has been one hell of a roller coaster year. But I think the show, the audience that we have today, everybody leaves on a high, and I think all of us are. Thank you so much for your time. So, any closing thoughts, any final thoughts you would like to give?
And thank you so much for listening me for 90 minutes. I think, and I'll wish you all happy New Year in advance. Thank you, and feel free to reach out if you feel so. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Again, we'll be back in the new year. So, with this, we conclude 25 episodes and 2020 at the Money Talks. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Please stay safe, stay socially distant, and we'll see you in 2021.